He loved his daughter for 9 years. Then the maid exposed his wife's lie. The child was never his. Who was the real father? A great love story from 1950s. I promise you will enjoy this. Hi, my beautiful, precious family. Let's begin with a prayer from the deepest place in my heart. Dear God, please place your healing hands on me and bless every soul watching this video. Surround them with peace, protect their homes, and fill their lives with endless love and light. Amen. This is your Mr. Peter. Though I'm resting, I feel every drop of your love. Every comment, every prayer, it reaches me. You are not just subscribers. You are my family, my strength, my reason to rise. To my beautiful new family members, welcome home. Please tell me in the comments, what brought you here? And how did our stories touch your heart? Your words matter. I truly want to know you. Also, please remember, if you see my stories on any other channel, they're not from me. This is the only real Mr. Peter channel. Let's protect this space, built on truth, love, and unity. Before we begin, I have one small request. Please like, comment, and stay till the end. If you ever feel the intro is long, skip it, but please never skip the story. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel. While I recover, James will share today's story with you. A story made with love, crafted with faith and given from my heart to yours.
9 years. 9 years of believing his world was unshakable. Beckett Royce sat in the sterile hospital corridor, staring at the medical report that had just destroyed everything he thought he knew about his life. The words blurred together through his shock. Genetic incompatibility indicates subject is not the biological father. For 9 years, he had been the successful entrepreneur with the breathtaking mansion, the beautiful wife, and the daughter whose laughter made every sacrifice worthwhile. Beckett Royce had built an empire in textiles, commanded respect in Virginia's business circles, and believed he had created the perfect family. Now, as 8-year-old Isley recovered from her emergency appendectomy 3 floors above, the routine blood work required for her surgery had revealed a truth that shattered his foundation like glass. He wasn't her father. Not biologically. Not really. The sound of soft footsteps made him look up. Naomi Breyer approached with 2 cups of coffee, her dark eyes filled with the same worry that had kept her at the hospital for 3 straight days. At 28, she moved with a quiet grace that commanded attention without demanding it. Her simple dress elegant in its understated beauty. "Any word from the doctor?" she asked, settling beside him with the natural ease of someone who had become indispensable to his family over the past 3 years. "She's going to be fine," Beckett managed, his voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotional devastation. "Full recovery expected." "Thank the Lord," Naomi whispered, and he saw tears of relief gather in her eyes. "I've been praying every hour since we got here. That little girl means the world to me." That little girl. The phrase hit him like a revelation. For 3 days, while Cambria had made token appearances between her social obligations, Naomi had been the one keeping vigil. She had been the one holding Isley's hand during the scary moments, singing softly to her during the pain, staying strong when the child needed comfort most. Just like she had been doing for 3 years, he realized with stunning clarity. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every fever, every small crisis of childhood, Naomi had been there with patience, love, and the kind of maternal instinct that couldn't be taught or faked. "Naomi," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "Of course, Mr. Royce. 3 years ago, when you first started working for us, did you ever notice anything unusual? Any visitors to the house when I was traveling? Anything at all that seemed strange?" For a moment she was silent, her fingers whirring the handle of her coffee cup. Then she met his eyes with the kind of steady honesty that had always been her defining characteristic. "There was one night," she said quietly, "about 4 years ago when you were in Tokyo on that big textile deal. I was working late, cleaning the library, and I saw a man leaving through the garden door. I didn't recognize him, but Mrs. Royce came downstairs a few minutes later in her robe, looking flustered." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. Tokyo. 4 years ago. Isley would have been conceived right around that time. Not with him, but with some stranger whose name he would probably never know. "Did you tell anyone?" he asked. "No, sir, it wasn't my place to say anything, and I—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I hoped I was wrong about what I'd seen." "But you weren't wrong." "No," she said softly. "I don't think I was." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of revealed truth settling between them. Around them, the hospital hummed with its constant activity. Visitors coming and going, medical staff making their rounds, the everyday drama of life and death playing out in sterile corridors. "Mr. Royce," Naomi said finally, her voice gentle but firm, "that little girl upstairs loves you more than life itself. She calls you Daddy with such pride, talks about you constantly, lights up whenever you walk into a room. Biology doesn't change any of that. Doesn't it?" The question came out raw, bitter. "In the eyes of the law, in divorce proceedings, in custody battles, doesn't biology change everything?" "Maybe legally," she replied, turning to face him with eyes that blazed with quiet conviction. "But not in the ways that matter. Not in love, not in the bond you've built with her, not in the father you've been every single day of her life." The drive home passed in a blur of Virginia countryside and mounting dread. Beckett's mind raced with implications, with legal considerations, with the conversation he was about to have with the woman he had married 9 years ago in what now felt like another lifetime. Royce Manor sat majestically atop its rolling hills, its white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun like something from a dream of southern gentility. 3 generations of Royce men had built their fortune within these walls, and Beckett had always imagined Isley carrying on that legacy. Now he wondered if he would even have the right to call her his heir. Cambria was in the rose garden when he arrived, kneeling among her prize-winning blooms in a yellow sundress that perfectly matched her golden hair. She looked up as his footsteps crunched across the gravel drive, and something in his expression made her slowly rise to her feet. "How is she?" Cambria asked, brushing dirt from her gardening gloves with practiced elegance. "She's going to be fine," Beckett said, stopping 10 feet away from his wife. But the blood work revealed something interesting. He watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of surprise, any crack in the perfect composure she wore, like expensive jewelry. But Cambria's expression didn't change, didn't betray even a flicker of shock or guilt. "Oh?" she said with studied casualness. "I'm not her biological father, Cambria. The genetic tests prove it conclusively." For a moment, the only sound was the buzz of honeybees among the roses and the distant lowing of cattle in the far pasture. Then Cambria sighed and pulled off her gardening gloves with deliberate precision. "I see," she said simply. "That's it?" Beckett's voice rose, years of growing suspicions and mounting distance finally boiling over. "I just told you that the daughter we've been raising together isn't mine, and all you can say is, 'I see'?" Cambria shrugged with the kind of elegant indifference that had once seemed sophisticated, but now struck him as merely cold. "What did you expect, Beckett? Hysterics? Denials? We both know this marriage has been more arrangement than romance for years. You have your business empire, I have my social standing, and Isley has had a comfortable life. Isn't that enough?" The casual cruelty of her response hit him like a physical blow. This was the woman he had married, the mother of the child he loved, and she was discussing their daughter's parentage like a minor inconvenience in their otherwise satisfactory arrangement. "Whose is she?" he asked quietly. "It was during your Tokyo trip," Cambria replied with the same tone she might use to discuss the weather. "You were gone for 3 weeks building your precious textile contracts, and I was lonely. It happened once with someone who meant nothing to me then, and means even less now." "Who?" The single word hung between them like a blade. "A visiting businessman. Married, from what I gathered. Long gone now, back to whatever life he had before our encounter." She examined her manicured nails with studied disinterest. "Really, Beckett, does it matter? It was one mistake in an otherwise perfectly adequate arrangement." "Adequate?" The word came out like a curse. "Our marriage, our daughter, our life together, you call it adequate? What would you call it?" Cambria's blue eyes met his with challenging directness. "You've spent the last 9 years building your business empire, traveling constantly, working 18-hour days. I've maintained our social position, managed our household, raised our daughter. We've both gotten what we wanted out of this arrangement." "I wanted a family," Beckett said quietly. "I wanted a wife who loved me and children we created together out of that love. I wanted something real." "Real?" Cambria laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Reality is that marriages in our social circle are business partnerships, Beckett. Love is a luxury we can't afford when there are reputations to maintain and fortunes to preserve. You got a beautiful wife who never embarrassed you at social functions and gave you a charming daughter to spoil. I got financial security and social status. What more did either of us really need?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, and Beckett realized he was seeing his wife clearly for perhaps the first time in their 9-year marriage. She was beautiful, accomplished, perfectly groomed for the role of society wife, and utterly, completely hollow where her heart should have been. "I'm filing for divorce," he said simply. Cambria's perfect composure cracked slightly, revealing a flash of calculation beneath the surface. "That would be complicated, expensive, public. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny?" "More prepared than you might think," Beckett replied, thinking of the conversation he'd had with his lawyers 6 months ago when his suspicions about Isley's parentage had first begun to surface. "My attorneys have been very thorough in their preparations." "And custody?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, betraying the first real emotion she'd shown. "Won't be an issue," he said with quiet confidence. "Any judge who looks at our respective relationships with Isley will see very clearly where her best interests lie." It was true. For 8 years he had been the parent who attended school plays, bandaged scraped knees, read bedtime stories, and provided the steady, loving presence that every child needed. Cambria had been beautiful wallpaper, present but not truly engaged, decorative but not functional. "You might be surprised by what a good lawyer can accomplish," Cambria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "So might you," Beckett replied evenly. As he walked toward the house, leaving his soon-to-be ex-wife standing alone among her precious roses, Beckett heard the sound of singing drifting from the open kitchen window. The voice was rich and warm, humming an old spiritual with the kind of soulful beauty that seemed to wrap around a person's heart and squeeze gently. Naomi. Through the window he could see her preparing dinner, her movements graceful and sure as she worked in the kitchen that had become her domain over the past 3 years. She was singing to herself, unaware that anyone was listening, and the pure joy in her voice stood in stark contrast to the calculated coldness of the conversation he had just endured. For the first time since receiving that devastating medical report, Beckett felt something other than despair stir in his chest. A memory surfaced with crystal clarity. Isley, home sick with chicken pox 6 months ago, feverish and miserable despite all of Cambria's expensive remedies. It hadn't been his wife who sat by their daughter's bedside through the long night, reading story after story until the child finally fell into peaceful sleep. It had been Naomi, always Naomi, the woman who knew exactly which songs calmed Isley's nightmares, which foods tempted her appetite when she was feeling poorly, which stories made her laugh even when she was scared. The woman who had loved his daughter, their daughter, with the kind of selfless devotion that couldn't be bought or taught or faked. As if summoned by his thoughts, Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her dark eyes immediately found his, and she crossed the yard toward him with the quick, worried steps of someone who cared deeply about his welfare. "Mr. Royce, is everything all right? You look—" She searched for a diplomatic way to describe the devastation written across his features. "I'm getting divorced," he said simply, and watched relief flood her face so completely that he realized she had been dreading this conversation as much as he had. "Thank the Lord," she whispered, then immediately looked mortified at her reaction. "I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize," Beckett said gently. "You're right to be relieved. This should have happened years ago." They stood facing each other in the golden Virginia sunlight, employer and employee, but also something deeper that neither had dared to name. In her eyes he saw understanding, compassion, and a kind of quiet strength that made him believe everything might actually be all right. "Naomi," he said quietly, and her name on his lips felt like the first honest word he had spoken in years. "I need you to know that whatever happens with the divorce, whatever changes come, I want you to stay. Isley needs you. I need you. This family—" He paused, correcting himself. "This family wouldn't exist without you." Tears gathered in her dark eyes, but she was smiling through them. "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Royce. That little girl is the light of my life, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she's happy and safe." "And me?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "What about me?" For a moment that stretched like eternity, they looked at each other with the kind of honesty that changes everything. Then Naomi stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, close enough to catch the scent of lavender soap and something indefinably sweet that was purely her. "You're the best man I've ever known," she said quietly. "Any woman would be lucky to have your love. Any woman." The phrase hung between them, heavy with possibility and hope, and the first tentative recognition that maybe, just maybe, the destruction of his marriage might actually be the beginning of something far more beautiful than what he was losing. As evening shadows began to lengthen across the Virginia countryside, Beckett Royce stood with the woman who had quietly become the heart of his home and realized that some endings were actually beginnings in disguise. The truth about Isley's parentage had shattered his world, but it had also opened his eyes to where his real family had been hiding all along. Now he just had to be brave enough to reach for the happiness that had been waiting patiently for him to notice it. Chapter 2. Seeing Clearly. The next morning brought sunshine and the kind of clarity that only comes after the worst storms have passed. Beckett woke to the sound of genuine laughter echoing through Royce Manor, something that hadn't graced these halls in longer than he could remember. He found the source in Isley's bedroom, where his daughter sat cross-legged on her canopy bed, while Naomi braided colored ribbons into her dark hair. The child was animated in a way she never was around Cambria, chattering about everything and nothing, while Naomi listened with the focused attention that made every word seem precious. "And the nurse said I was the bravest patient she'd ever seen," Isley was saying, her hands gesturing wildly. "But I told her I wasn't really brave because I cried when they put the needle in my arm." "Being brave doesn't mean you don't cry, sweetheart," Naomi replied gently, her fingers working with practiced skill. "Being brave means you do what needs doing even when you're scared. And you did that beautifully." Beckett's heart tightened at the easy wisdom in Naomi's words, at the way she spoke to Isley like an equal worthy of respect, rather than a child to be managed. When had Cambria ever offered such thoughtful guidance? "Will you read to me tonight?" Isley asked, twisting to look at Naomi with hopeful eyes. "The story about the princess who saves herself." "Of course, baby girl," Naomi said, and Beckett noticed she didn't add the usual qualifier about asking permission. Something had shifted between them yesterday. Some invisible barrier had dissolved. "Daddy!" Isley spotted him in the doorway and bounced with excitement. "Naomi's making my hair beautiful for when Mama comes to see me today." Beckett's jaw tightened. Cambria had promised to visit this morning, though her track record for keeping such promises was less than stellar. "Has your mother called?" "Not yet," Naomi said quietly, meeting his eyes with understanding. "But I'm sure she'll be here soon." They both knew she wouldn't be. Cambria's pattern was predictable. Grand promises followed by elegant excuses. Board meetings, charity luncheons, social obligations that somehow always took precedence over her daughter's needs. "Actually," Beckett said, settling into the chair beside Isley's bed, "your mother had to go away for a while. She's dealing with some adult things that require her attention." It was a gentler version of the truth than an 8-year-old needed to hear. The full explanation, that Mama had never really wanted to be a mother, that she'd seen Isley as an accessory rather than a person, could wait until the child was old enough to understand adult cruelty. "Will she come back?" Isley asked with the directness that children brought to life's biggest questions. "Someday she might visit," Beckett said carefully. "But for now it's just going to be the three of us. Is that all right with you?" Isley looked between him and Naomi, her young face serious as she processed this information. Then her expression brightened like sunrise. "Just us three? Like a real family?" "We've always been a real family, sweetheart," Naomi said softly. "Some families just look different from others." After Isley went down for her afternoon rest, Beckett found himself really observing Naomi for the first time. Not as an employee, not as convenient help, but as the remarkable woman she had always been. She moved through the house with quiet confidence, tending to tasks that kept their world running smoothly. But it was the small details that struck him, the way she arranged fresh flowers in Isley's room, the careful attention she paid to preparing meals that would tempt a recovering child's appetite, the gentle humming that filled the spaces between chores with something that felt like contentment. "Naomi," he said as she passed through the library with an armload of fresh linens, "could we talk?" She set down the linens and smoothed her simple blue dress, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as her way of preparing for serious conversations. "Of course, Mr. Royce." "Beckett," he corrected gently. "I think we're past formalities now, don't you?" Color rose in her cheeks, but she nodded. Beckett. His name in her voice sounded like music. How had he never noticed that before? "I need you to know," he began, then stopped, searching for words adequate to express what he was feeling. "Yesterday, when I was sitting in that hospital corridor thinking my world was ending, you were the one who reminded me what really mattered. You were the one who helped me see that love is stronger than biology." "That little girl loves you with her whole heart," Naomi replied. "Nothing else matters." "And what about you?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Do you, that is, could you ever?" He was making a mess of this, stumbling over words like a schoolboy. But Naomi's eyes had gone wide with something that looked like hope, and her breath had quickened in a way that gave him courage. "Could I ever what?" she asked softly. "Could you ever see me as more than just your employer? Could you ever imagine us as something real?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Through the tall windows, afternoon sunlight painted everything in golden hues, that made the moment feel suspended in amber. "I've been imagining it for months," she whispered finally. "I've been trying not to, telling myself it was impossible, but, but you're the kindest man I've ever known. You're devoted to Isley. You treat everyone with respect regardless of their station. And you have the kind of gentle strength that makes a woman feel safe." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "So, yes, I can imagine us as something real. I've been imagining it despite myself." The confession hung between them like a bridge spanning impossible distances. Beckett felt his heart racing with the kind of excitement he hadn't experienced since he was young enough to believe in fairy tales. "There will be talk," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "People will disapprove." "Let them," Naomi replied with surprising firmness. "I've spent my whole life caring what other people think, living small to make them comfortable. I'm tired of it. I want to live a life that feels real, that feels full, that feels like home." "Yes," she breathed, "like home." That evening, after Isley had been tucked into bed with her customary story, Beckett made the phone call that would change everything. "Theron," he said when his lawyer answered, "I need you to expedite the divorce proceedings, and I want you to be very thorough about the financial arrangements." "How thorough?" Theron Hammermeister's voice carried the careful neutrality of a man who had handled many such cases. "I want her to leave with exactly what she brought to this marriage. Her maiden name and nothing else. Everything she's accumulated during our years together was built on lies and deception. I see no reason she should profit from either." "That's aggressive, Beckett." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Beckett looked through the library window toward the kitchen, where Naomi was cleaning up after dinner with the same careful attention she brought to everything she did. "She made her choices, Theron. Now she can live with the consequences. And custody won't be an issue. Any judge who looks at our respective relationships with Isley will see where her best interests truly lie." It was a conversation that would have terrified him a week ago. Now, with Naomi's quiet strength supporting him and the truth finally revealed, it felt like justice rather than revenge. Later that night, as he sat in his study reviewing business papers, Naomi appeared in the doorway with a cup of coffee and the kind of shy smile that made his heart skip beats. "I thought you might need this," she said, setting the cup on his desk. "What I need," he said, standing and moving around the desk to face her, "is to know if you meant what you said earlier about imagining us as something real." "I meant every word. Then I have a confession to make." He reached out to take her hands, marveling at their softness, their warmth, the way they fit perfectly in his. "I've been falling in love with you for months without even realizing it. Every morning when I came downstairs and saw you in the kitchen, every evening when I heard you singing to Isley, every moment when you made this house feel like a home instead of just a building, I was falling deeper and deeper in love with you." Tears gathered in her dark eyes, but she was smiling through them. "I love you too," she whispered. "I love your kindness, your strength, the way you are with Isley, the way you make me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something." "You're worth everything," he said fiercely. "You're worth more than every dollar I've ever made, every deal I've ever closed, every achievement I've ever accomplished. You're the heart of this family, Naomi. You always have been." When he kissed her, it was with the gentle reverence of a man who had finally found his way home after years of wandering in the wilderness. Her lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like hope and possibility and all the dreams he had never dared to voice. "What happens now?" she asked when they finally broke apart, both breathless and glowing. "Now," he said, pulling her closer, "we build the life we should have had all along. The three of us, together, the way it was always meant to be." Outside, Virginia night settled over the countryside like a blessing, full of stars and promises, and the kind of quiet joy that comes from finally choosing love over convention, truth over comfort, real happiness over mere respectability. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new steps toward the future they were building together. But tonight, in the circle of each other's arms, Beckett and Naomi Breyer allowed themselves to believe that love might actually conquer everything, after all. Chapter 3. Sweet Victory. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived like Christmas morning wrapped in legal documents. Beckett sat in his study, reading through the settlement with growing satisfaction. Theron Hammermeister had been thorough, methodical, and absolutely ruthless in his execution of what could only be described as complete legal devastation. Cambria West, she had already reverted to her maiden name, would be leaving their marriage with exactly what she had brought to it: her clothing, her personal jewelry, and her considerable talent for manipulation. Everything else, the house, the business, the investments, even the Mercedes she drove, would remain with Beckett. She's contesting it, of course, Theron said, settling into the leather chair across from Beckett's desk. Her lawyers are claiming she deserves half of everything as a faithful wife who contributed to the household. Faithful? Beckett's laugh held no humor. That's going to be difficult to prove when we have DNA evidence that she conceived a child with another man during our marriage. Exactly. And when it comes to custody, Theron smiled with the satisfaction of a man who held all the winning cards. Well, let's just say that any judge who looks at the evidence will see very clearly which parent has been actively involved in Isley's daily care, and which parent has been treating her like an accessory. It was true. Beckett's lawyers had been thorough, documenting everything from school pickup records to doctor's appointments to parent-teacher conferences. The pattern was clear and damning. Beckett had been present for every important moment of Isley's life, while Cambria had attended only when it served her social calendar. How long before it's final? Beckett asked. 6 weeks, maybe less. She doesn't have grounds to fight the settlement, and she knows it. This is all posturing, hoping you'll get tired of the process and offer her something just to make it go away. Not a chance, Beckett said firmly. She made her choices. Now she can live with the consequences. That evening, as he shared the news with Naomi over dinner, he saw relief flood her beautiful face like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "It's really over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's really over," he confirmed. "In a few weeks, I'll be a free man." And then what? The question held such hope, such careful optimism, that his heart nearly burst with love for her. "Then," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "I'd like to take you on a proper date, to dinner, maybe dancing, whatever you'd enjoy. I want to court you the way you deserve to be courted, Naomi Breyer." "Court me?" She laughed, the sound like music filling the dining room. "That's very old-fashioned of you, Mr. Royce." "I'm an old-fashioned man when it comes to the woman I love," he replied seriously. "You deserve romance, attention, all the gestures that show you how precious you are to me." Color rose in her cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "I'd love that. I'd love all of that." From the kitchen doorway came the sound of delighted giggling. They turned to see Isley peeking around the corner, her eyes bright with excitement. "Are you going to marry Naomi, Daddy?" she asked with the directness that only children possessed. Beckett and Naomi exchanged glances, both blushing like teenagers caught holding hands. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" Beckett asked gently. "More than anything." Isley rushed forward and threw her arms around both of them. "Then we'd be a real family forever and ever." "We're already a real family," Naomi said softly, stroking Isley's hair. "Love makes families, not just marriage certificates." "But marriage certificates make it official," Isley said with 8-year-old logic. "Like when you sign your name on important papers at school." Their laughter filled the dining room. bright and warm and full of the kind of joy that money couldn't buy, but love created effortlessly. 2 days later, the custody hearing proved to be even more of a formality than Beckett had hoped. Judge Harrison Vale Beaumont took one look at the evidence, medical records showing Beckett at every doctor's appointment, school records showing him at every conference, photograph after photograph of father and daughter, at dance recitals and school plays while Cambria was notably absent, and made his decision with swift efficiency. Custody is awarded to Mr. Royce, the judge announced. Mrs. West will have supervised visitation rights 1 weekend per month, should she choose to exercise them. Cambria's face went white with fury, but her lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm. They both knew she had no grounds for appeal, no evidence to support her claim of being a devoted mother. As they left the courthouse, Beckett felt lighter than he had in years. The legal shackles of his failed marriage were finally broken, and the path to his real life, his life with Naomi and Isley, was clear and unobstructed. "How does it feel to be a free man?" Naomi asked as they walked down the courthouse steps together. "Like I can finally breathe," he replied, taking her hand openly for the first time in public. "Like I can finally live." That weekend, he took her on their first official date. Dinner at Richmond's finest restaurant, where the maitre d' seated them at the best table without question, and the waiters treated Naomi with the same respectful attention they gave all distinguished guests. She was elegant in a blue dress that brought out her eyes, poised and gracious as she navigated conversation with the kind of natural intelligence that had always attracted him. "You're staring," she said softly, smiling over her wineglass. "I'm memorizing," he corrected. "Our first real date, our first evening as whatever we are now." "What are we now?" she asked. "We're the beginning of something beautiful," he said simply. "We're two people who found each other despite every reason why we shouldn't have, and we're brave enough to see where that leads us." After dinner, they drove to the overlook above the James River, where the lights of Richmond sparkled below like scattered diamonds. They talked for hours about their childhoods, their dreams, their hopes for the future they were building together. "I never thought I could have this," Naomi said as they stood looking out over the valley. "A man who looks at me like I'm precious, who wants to know my thoughts and dreams, who makes me feel like I'm worth something." "You're worth everything," Beckett said, turning to face her in the moonlight. "You're worth more than I ever dreamed possible." When he kissed her this time, it was with the passion of a man who no longer had to hide his feelings, no longer had to pretend that the woman in his arms was anything less than the love of his life. The next morning brought the final divorce decree, delivered by courier with the efficiency that money and good lawyers could provide. Beckett opened the envelope at the breakfast table, with Naomi and Isley watching expectantly. "It's done," he announced, holding up the official document. "I'm divorced." "Hooray!" Isley cheered, jumping up from her chair. "Now you can marry Naomi." "Well," Beckett said, grinning at the woman who had transformed his world, "I suppose I should ask her properly first." To Isley's delighted squeals and Naomi's shocked gasps, he dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, taking her hand in his with reverence that made her heart skip beats. "Naomi Breyer," he said, his voice strong and clear, "you've been the heart of this family from the moment you walked into our lives. You've loved my daughter as your own, made this house a home, and shown me what real love looks like. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Isley's mother, and my partner in building the most beautiful life imaginable?" Tears streamed down her face, but her smile was radiant as sunshine. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, yes." The engagement ring was simple but perfect, a classic solitaire that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the kitchen walls. As he slipped it onto her finger, Beckett felt the last piece of his broken world snap into place, creating something infinitely more beautiful than what he had lost. "When?" Isley demanded, bouncing with excitement. "When will you get married?" "Soon," Beckett promised, looking into Naomi's eyes and seeing his own happiness reflected there. "Very soon." That afternoon, as word of the engagement spread through their small social circle, the phone began ringing with congratulations. Dr. Dempsey Vale Codera called to offer his services as wedding officiant. Clarice Wainwright called to volunteer her garden for the ceremony. Even the household staff, the few who had stayed loyal through the scandal, called to express their joy. But the call that mattered most came from Isley herself, who ceremoniously dialed their own number from the upstairs extension, just to officially welcome Naomi to the family. "Hello, this is Isley Royce," she announced formally when Naomi answered. "I'm calling to tell you that I'm very happy you're going to be my new mama, and I can't wait for the wedding." "This is Naomi soon-to-be Royce," Naomi replied just as formally, tears streaming down her face from pure joy. "And I'm calling to tell you that I'm the luckiest woman in the world to get to be your mama." As evening fell over Virginia, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the Royce family, soon to be complete, sat together on their front porch, planning the wedding that would finally make official what their hearts had known for months. They were home, they were family, and they were finally, blissfully, perfectly free to love each other without reservation or fear. The best was yet to come. Chapter 4. Planning Forever. Love transformed everything it touched, and nowhere was this more evident than in the planning of a wedding that would be remembered not for its extravagance, but for its perfect simplicity. 3 weeks after the engagement, Royce Manor buzzed with the kind of happy energy that comes from dreams being transformed into reality. Wedding magazines lay scattered across the kitchen table, flower catalogs marked with careful notes, and lists written in Naomi's elegant handwriting detailed everything from menu plans to seating arrangements. But this wasn't the elaborate society wedding that Cambria had insisted upon 9 years earlier, with its 500 guests and symphony orchestra and cake that cost more than most people's annual salary. This was something entirely different. Something real, intimate, and absolutely perfect. "I want it to be just us," Naomi had said on the night of their engagement, her eyes shining as she spoke. "Just the people who truly matter, in a place that feels like home." The backyard, Beckett had suggested, thinking of the garden where roses bloomed in wild profusion and ancient oak trees provided natural cathedral arches. "The backyard," she had agreed with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Where Isley plays, where we've spent our happiest moments together. I can't imagine anywhere more perfect." Now, a month before their July wedding date, that vision was becoming reality with the kind of attention to detail that made ordinary moments magical. "Look, Daddy," Isley burst into the kitchen, holding a sketch pad covered with elaborate drawings. "I designed my flower girl dress. Naomi says I can help pick the flowers, too." The drawing showed a little girl in a flowing dress, surrounded by roses, butterflies, and what appeared to be several friendly animals. It was the kind of artwork that belonged on refrigerators and in memory books, precious because it came from a heart overflowing with joy. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Beckett said, lifting his daughter onto his lap to examine her masterpiece more closely. "Tell me about these creatures here." "Those are the rabbits that live under the rose bushes," Isley explained with the seriousness of a professional artist. "And this is Mrs. Mockingbird, who sings every morning, and these are all the butterflies that come to visit Naomi's flowers. They all want to be at the wedding, too." Naomi looked up from the menu she was planning, her eyes soft with the kind of love that made Beckett's heart skip beats. "I think having all our garden friends at the wedding is a wonderful idea," she said. "After all, they've been part of our family story from the beginning." It was details like this that made their wedding planning feel less like an event and more like a celebration of the life they had already been building together. Every decision reflected not what would impress others, but what would make them genuinely happy. The guest list was delightfully short. Dr. Dempsey Vale Coder and his wife, Clarice Wainwright, Naomi's sister, Geneva Fay, who was traveling from Richmond, and a handful of close friends who had supported them through the challenges of the past year. 30 people total, intimate enough that every guest would feel cherished, small enough that the focus remained on love rather than spectacle. "My dress is going to be simple," Naomi told Geneva Fay during one of their weekly phone calls, twirling the engagement ring that had become her favorite jewelry. "Ivory silk, nothing too elaborate. I want to look like myself, just the very best version of myself." "The best version of yourself is the woman who made Beckett Royce fall head over heels in love," Geneva Fay replied with the frank affection of sisters. "Whatever dress you choose, you're going to be radiant." The ceremony itself would be conducted by Dr. Coder, who had surprised everyone by revealing that he was licensed to perform marriages in Virginia. "I got ordained years ago to marry my nephew and his wife," he explained with a smile. "Never thought I'd use it again, but I can't imagine anyone I'd rather marry than you two." Every evening after dinner, the three of them would walk through the garden, discussing placement for chairs, the arch where they would exchange vows, the area where they would serve cake and champagne afterward. These weren't stressful planning sessions, but rather gentle conversations about creating the perfect setting for the most important day of their lives. "I want to plant something new," Naomi said one evening as they stood beneath the oak tree where Beckett had proposed. "Something that will grow with our marriage, that we can watch flourish over the years." "What kind of something?" Isley asked, already imagining the possibilities. "A rose bush," Naomi replied without hesitation. "White roses for new beginnings, planted right here where Daddy asked me to marry him. Every year on our anniversary, we can watch it bloom and remember this perfect time." The florist they chose was an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Fairfax, who ran a small shop in Richmond and understood that the most beautiful arrangements came from the heart rather than the wallet. When they explained their vision, garden roses in soft colors, baby's breath, and greenery from their own grounds, her eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Simple elegance," she pronounced approvingly, "the kind of wedding that people remember not because it was expensive, but because it was full of love." The cake came from a local bakery known more for taste than elaborate decoration. 3 layers of vanilla with fresh strawberries and cream, topped with the same white roses that would bloom throughout the garden. "I want people to actually enjoy eating it," Naomi laughed when the baker suggested fondant sculptures. "This is a celebration, not a museum exhibit." But it was the evening conversations after Eastleigh had gone to bed, and they could speak freely about their hopes and dreams, that truly made the wedding planning special. "Are you nervous?" Beckett asked one night as they sat in the library, surrounded by the books that had witnessed their love story unfold. "Not about marrying you," Naomi replied immediately. "Never about that. But sometimes I wonder, are we doing the right thing? Making it so simple, I mean. You could have a society wedding, something that would restore your standing in the community." "My standing in the community," Beckett said, pulling her closer to him on the sofa, "is based on having you as my wife and Isley as my daughter. Any community that doesn't celebrate that isn't worth belonging to. And you're sure, absolutely certain that this is what you want." "I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life," he said, cupping her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "Naomi, you're not just the woman I want to marry. You're the woman I want to grow old with, to face every challenge beside, to share every joy and triumph and quiet evening with for the rest of my life. Even when I'm old and gray and not nearly as pretty as I am now. Especially then," he said seriously, "because by then I'll have had decades to fall more deeply in love with your mind, your heart, your soul, all the things that make you who you are. Your beauty will just be bonus." The kiss that followed was soft and sweet, and full of promises about the life they were building together. As June melted into July and their wedding day approached, the excitement became almost tangible. Isley could barely contain her joy, practicing her flower girl walk in the garden every afternoon and occasionally breaking into spontaneous songs about love and weddings and families living happily ever after. The household staff, those who had remained loyal through the divorce, threw themselves into wedding preparations with the enthusiasm of people who genuinely cared about the family they served. The cook experimented with recipes for the reception dinner. The gardener ensured that every flower bed was in perfect condition, and the housekeeper polished silver and pressed linens with the attention to detail of someone preparing for royalty. "It feels like the whole world is celebrating with us," Naomi mused one evening as they watched fireflies dance among the roses. "The whole world that matters," Beckett corrected gently, "and that's all we need." But even as they basked in the joy of their approaching wedding, neither of them noticed the figure that occasionally appeared at the edge of their property line in the evenings, watching the preparations with a mixture of longing and regret that would have surprised them both. Cambria West had been driving by Royce Manor for weeks, unable to resist seeing what she had lost, unable to fully comprehend how completely her life had changed. The woman who had once taken her comfortable existence for granted now lived in a small apartment in Richmond, supported by the modest inheritance from her late parents and the growing realization that she had thrown away something irreplaceable. From her car, parked just beyond the property line, she could see the lights glowing warmly in the windows, could hear the sound of laughter carrying across the evening air, could glimpse the three figures moving through the garden with the easy affection of a family that truly belonged together. It was a sight that should have filled her with bitterness, but instead left her with something she had never expected to feel: the hollow ache of genuine regret. In the garden of Royce Manor, surrounded by flowers and love and plans for the future, Beckett and Naomi Breyer continued planning the wedding that would make their family complete. They were building something beautiful, something lasting, something that no amount of regret or longing could ever diminish. The best was truly yet to come. Before we move to Chapter 5, if you're enjoying this story, please like it, tap the bell icon, and join this beautiful family. Because if you ignore this, it will truly hurt Mr. Peter's heart. He never wants to lose you. Chapter 5. The Final Touches. With just 2 weeks until the wedding, magic seemed to settle over Royce Manor like morning dew, transforming ordinary moments into something luminous and unforgettable. The garden had never looked more beautiful. Under Naomi's gentle guidance and the gardener's expert care, every flower bed bloomed in perfect harmony, white roses climbing the ancient oak trees, lavender filling the air with its sweet fragrance, and beds of delphiniums and peonies creating natural bouquets throughout the grounds. "It's like the whole garden knows we're getting married," Isley announced one morning as she helped Naomi cut flowers for the house arrangements. "Everything is extra pretty, just for us." "Gardens always respond to love," Naomi replied, showing the little girl how to cut stems at the proper angle. "When people are happy, plants seem to sense it and want to be part of the celebration." Beckett watched from the breakfast room window, his heart full to overflowing as he observed his two favorite people working together with the easy intimacy that had developed between them over the past months. Naomi had become Isley's mother in every way that mattered: patient teacher, gentle disciplinarian, enthusiastic supporter of every childhood dream and adventure. "Mr. Royce?" The cook appeared at his elbow with the morning mail. "This came for you. Looks important." The envelope bore the letterhead of Richmond's most exclusive jeweler, and inside was confirmation that his special order was ready for pickup. The surprise he had been planning for weeks was finally complete. That afternoon, while Naomi took Isley into town for final dress fittings, Beckett drove to Richmond to collect the most important purchase of his life: not Naomi's engagement ring, which she already wore with such obvious joy, but something even more precious. "It's exactly what you requested," the elderly jeweler said with satisfaction, opening a small velvet box to reveal its contents. White gold, just like her mother's engagement ring, with her birthstone in the center. The engraving came out beautifully. Inside the box lay a delicate pendant necklace designed specifically for 8-year-old Isley. The center stone was a deep blue sapphire, her September birthstone, surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the light like stars. But it was the engraving on the back that made it truly special. "To Isley, my beloved daughter, love always, Mama Naomi. July 15th, 1959. "She's going to treasure it forever," the jeweler predicted, with the wisdom of someone who had seen decades of love stories play out in precious metals and gemstones. That evening, as they sat together in the library after dinner, Beckett presented the necklace to Naomi with a joy that rivaled Christmas morning. "For Isley?" she asked, tears gathering in her eyes as she read the inscription. "Oh, Beckett, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. I wanted her to have something from you to mark this day," he explained. "Something she can keep forever, to remember the moment when you officially became her mother." "I'm already her mother," Naomi said softly, cradling the jewelry box like it held the crown jewels. "I have been since the day I first held her when she had that fever, since the first bedtime story I read to her, since the first time she looked at me with trust in her eyes." "And now the whole world will know it," Beckett replied, pulling her into his arms with the contentment of a man who had finally found his way home. The days that followed passed in a blur of happy preparations. Geneva Fay arrived from Richmond with a suitcase full of excitement and tears of joy for her sister's happiness. Dr. Carteret and his wife came early to help with final arrangements, insisting that they wanted to be more than just wedding guests. They wanted to be part of the celebration in every possible way. "You've been like family to us through everything," Dr. Codere told Beckett as they walked through the garden one evening, checking the placement of chairs and the arch where the ceremony would take place. "Caroline and I couldn't be happier for you and Naomi." The wedding arch itself was a masterpiece of simplicity, white silk draped between two oak trees, with cascading arrangements of garden roses and baby's breath that looked like something from a fairy tale. 30 chairs arranged in perfect rows faced the arch, each one decorated with a small bouquet and white ribbon that fluttered in the evening breeze. "It's going to be perfect," Clarice Wainwright declared during her final inspection of the arrangements. "Simple, elegant, and full of love. Everything a real wedding should be." The night before the wedding, as tradition demanded, Beckett stayed with Dr. Carteret while Naomi enjoyed a girls' evening with Geneva Fay and Isley. The separation felt strange after months of spending every evening together, but it also built anticipation for the moment when they would see each other again at the altar. "Nervous?" Dr. Coderet asked as they sat on his porch with glasses of brandy and the comfortable silence of old friends. "Excited," Beckett corrected. "I've never been less nervous about anything in my life. Tomorrow I marry the love of my life and officially become father to the most wonderful little girl in the world. What could be better than that?" Meanwhile, at Royce Manor, Naomi was experiencing her own form of pre-wedding bliss. Her ivory silk dress hung in the wardrobe, pressed to perfection and waiting for tomorrow's magic. Her bouquet, white roses from their own garden mixed with baby's breath and tied with ribbons, sat in the refrigerator, staying fresh for the morning ceremony. "Tell me again about the first time you knew you loved him," Geneva Fay requested as she braided Naomi's hair for the night. "It wasn't one moment," Naomi replied thoughtfully. "It was 1,000 small moments. The way he looked at Isley with such pure love. The way he thanked me for things that other employers took for granted. The way he made me feel seen, valued, important. The way he never made me feel less than because of my background or my race. And now I can't imagine life without him, Naomi said simply. He's my partner, my best friend, my heart walking around outside my body. Tomorrow, when I say I do, I'll be promising to love him forever, and it's the easiest promise I'll ever make. From Isley's room came the sound of excited giggles as the little girl tried on her flower girl dress one final time, practicing her walk and rehearsing the words she would say during the ceremony. But none of them noticed the car that passed slowly by the front gate as evening fell, or the woman inside who sat watching the warm lights of the house with an expression of such profound longing that it would have moved even hearts hardened against her. Cambria West had made this drive every evening for the past month, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name to witness the happiness she had thrown away. Tonight, seeing the wedding preparations in their final stages, she finally understood the magnitude of what she had lost. Through the illuminated windows, she could see glimpses of the life that should have been hers. The loving family gathered together, the excitement of celebration, the warmth of genuine affection that she had been too shallow to recognize when she possessed it. In her small Richmond apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a social circle that had quickly forgotten her once her usefulness ended, Cambria had spent months trying to understand how her comfortable existence had collapsed so completely. Now, watching the woman she had dismissed as just the help become the heart of the family she had casually betrayed, the answer was finally clear. Love. It had always been about love, and she had never learned how to recognize it, value it, or return it. As she drove away from Royce Manor for what she knew would be the last time, Cambria West began to cry, not for what she had lost, but for what she had never been capable of appreciating when it was hers. Back in the house that glowed with warmth and anticipation, three people who had found their way to each other, prepared for the day that would make their family complete. They fell asleep to the sound of summer rain pattering gently against the windows, nature's way of ensuring that the morning would dawn fresh and perfect for new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring the wedding of the century, not because of its expense or grandeur, but because it would celebrate the kind of love that transforms lives, heals hearts, and creates families that are stronger than blood, deeper than tradition, and more lasting than any obstacle the world can create. The best was finally about to begin. Chapter 6. Wedding Morning. July 15th, 1959, dawned clear and perfect, as if the universe itself had decided to cooperate with love. Naomi woke to the sound of birdsong and the gentle rustle of wind through the oak trees that would soon witness her marriage to the man of her dreams. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom windows, painting everything in golden hues that made the morning feel touched by magic. From down the hall came the excited chatter of Eastleigh and Geneva Fay, already awake and bubbling with wedding day enthusiasm. The sound made her smile even before she was fully conscious. This was what happiness sounded like, she realized. This was what a real family felt like on the most important day of their lives. "Good morning, beautiful bride," Geneva Fay announced, entering with a breakfast tray and a smile bright enough to rival the sunshine. "How did you sleep?" "Like a woman who's about to marry her best friend," Naomi replied, stretching with the contentment of someone who had never been happier in her entire life. "I dreamed about the ceremony, about saying, 'I do,' about being Mrs. Beckett Royce." "And how did it feel in the dream?" "Like coming home," she said simply, "like everything in my life had been leading to this moment." Through the window, she could see the wedding preparations in their final stages. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, the flower-covered arch gleaming in the morning light, and the rose garden in full bloom, as if nature had timed its display specifically for this day. "Naomi! Naomi!" Easley burst through the door in a flutter of excitement and yellow silk. "Look, I'm wearing my flower girl dress, and it's the most beautiful thing in the whole world." The little girl twirled in the doorway, her dress spinning around her like sunshine-made fabric. The sight filled Naomi's heart to bursting. This child who had become her daughter in every way that mattered, so excited to be part of the ceremony that would make their family officially complete. "You look absolutely perfect," Naomi said, opening her arms for the enthusiastic hug that followed. "The most beautiful flower girl any bride could ask for. And look what Daddy gave me." Isley held up the sapphire necklace with pride, the pendant catching the morning light like a small star. "He said it's from you to remember forever that you're my real mama now." Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes as she fastened the necklace around Isley's neck, the symbol of adoption and love settling perfectly against the child's dress. "You've been my real daughter from the moment you let me read you bedtime stories," she said softly. "This just makes it official." Meanwhile, across town at Dr. Coderet's house, Beckett was experiencing his own version of wedding morning joy. He stood before the mirror in the guest room, adjusting his tie with hands that were steady despite the magnitude of the day ahead. Ready to become a married man again, Dr. Codere asked from the doorway, already dressed in his role as both best man and efficient. "I've been ready for this since the day I realized I was in love with her," Beckett replied with conviction. "Everything before this was just waiting for my real life to begin." "And Isley? How is she handling the idea of officially having a new mother?" Beckett's smile could have powered the entire state of Virginia. "She's been planning this day since before I even proposed. Last night, she told me she's going to be the best flower girl in the history of weddings because she wants everyone to know how happy she is that Naomi is going to be her mama forever." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the morning newspaper, delivered with the usual thud against the front door. Dr. Codere retrieved it, scanning the headlines before his expression grew serious. "Beckett," he said quietly, "you should see this." The society page of the Richmond Times-Dispatch featured a small item in the wedding announcements section. "Local businessman Beckett Royce will marry Miss Naomi Breyer this afternoon in a private ceremony at Royce Manor. The bride is formerly employed as governess to Mr. Royce's daughter Isley. Mr. Royce was recently divorced from the former Cambria West." "Well," Beckett said after reading it twice, "I suppose that makes it official. The whole world knows we're getting married today." "Are you concerned about the reaction?" "Not even slightly," Beckett replied, folding the paper with decisive finality. "Anyone who has a problem with my marrying the most wonderful woman in Virginia is welcome to keep their opinions to themselves." Back at Royce Manor, the day progressed with the smooth efficiency that comes from careful planning and genuine love. Mrs. Eleanor Fairfax arrived with the final flower arrangements, transforming the garden into something that belonged in fairy tales. The cook put finishing touches on the wedding cake, 3 perfect layers that smelled like vanilla and tasted like heaven. The household staff, dressed in their finest clothes, bustled about with the proud efficiency of people who truly cared about the family they served. "Everything is ready," Clarice Wainwright announced after her final inspection of the arrangements. "The chairs are positioned perfectly. The arch looks like something from a dream, and the weather couldn't be more cooperative. This is going to be a wedding to remember." At noon, Geneva Fay began helping Naomi with her final preparations. The ivory silk dress fit like it had been made for her, simple, elegant, and perfect, for a bride who valued substance over spectacle. Her bouquet, gathered fresh from their own garden that morning, seemed to glow with natural beauty. "You look radiant," Geneva Fay said as she fastened the pearl necklace that had belonged to their grandmother. "Like a woman who has found exactly where she belongs in the world." "That's exactly how I feel," Naomi replied, studying her reflection with wonder. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly the people I'm supposed to love." The sound of cars arriving in the drive announced that their guests were beginning to gather. Through the window, she could see familiar faces: Dr. Coderre's wife Caroline, several neighbors who had supported them through the challenges of the past year, and Naomi's former colleagues from her teaching days who had made the drive from Richmond to witness her happiness. But what moved her most was the sight of Beckett emerging from Dr. Carter's car, looking devastatingly handsome in his dark suit and talking animatedly with his friend about something that made them both laugh. This was the man she was about to marry, kind, honorable, devoted to his daughter, and brave enough to choose love over convention. 5 minutes, Miss Naomi, called one of the household staff from the hallway. Mr. Royce is taking his place at the altar. 5 minutes, Naomi repeated, taking a deep breath and smoothing her dress one final time. In 5 minutes, I become Mrs. Beckett Royce. Any second thoughts? Geneva Fay asked with a teasing smile. Only that I wish I could marry him twice, Naomi replied with absolute certainty. Once for today and once more just to experience this happiness all over again. As the first notes of the wedding music began to drift through the windows, Isley playing the piano with the concentration of a concert performer, Naomi took her sister's arm and prepared to walk toward the future she had never dared dream possible. Outside, 30 of their closest friends and family members rose to their feet, but Naomi had eyes only for the man waiting for her beneath the flower-covered arch. Beckett stood with Isley beside him, both of them glowing with joy so pure it took her breath away. This was love. This was family. This was home. And in just a few moments it would all be officially, legally, permanently theirs. The best was about to begin. Chapter 7. I Do. The moment Naomi stepped into the garden, the entire world seemed to hold its breath in recognition of something perfect unfolding. She appeared at the end of the rose-bordered aisle like a vision in ivory silk, her bouquet of white roses and baby's breath catching the afternoon sunlight, her face radiant with the kind of joy that made everyone present remember why they believed in love. Geneva Fay walked beside her as matron of honor, but all eyes were on the bride who moved with graceful confidence toward the future she had chosen. But it was the expression on Beckett's face that stopped conversations and brought tears to eyes throughout the small gathering. He stood beneath the flower-covered arch, looking like a man who had just been handed the keys to paradise, his love so evident that even the most cynical observer would have been moved by the sight. "She's beautiful," whispered Mrs. Caroline Coderre to her husband. "They both are," he replied softly, "beautiful and perfectly suited for each other." As Naomi reached the altar, Isley stepped forward with the ceremonial importance of someone performing the most crucial task of her young life. She carried the wedding rings on a small silk pillow, her sapphire necklace catching the light as she moved with the careful dignity of a child who understood she was part of something special. "We are gathered here today, Doctor," Coderre began, his voice carrying clearly across the garden, "to witness the marriage of Beckett Royce and Naomi Breyer, two people who have found in each other not just love, but the foundation for a family built on devotion, respect, and genuine affection." The words were simple, traditional, but they carried weight because everyone present could see the truth of them reflected in the couple's faces. "Marriage," Dr. Coderre continued, "is not just the joining of two people, but the creation of something new, a partnership that becomes stronger than the sum of its parts, a love that grows deeper with each shared joy and weathered storm." Beckett reached for Naomi's hands, and the simple contact sent visible waves of emotion through both of them. This was the moment they had been building toward since that first honest conversation in the hospital corridor, since the first time he had really seen her as more than just an employee, since the first moment she had allowed herself to hope that love might be possible for her. "Do you, Beckett, take Naomi to be your wife?" Dr. Coderre asked with gentle formality. "Do you promise to love her, honor her, cherish her, and stand by her side through all the seasons of life that lie ahead?" "I do," Beckett said, his voice strong and clear, carrying across the garden like a promise made to the universe itself. I promise to love Naomi with everything I am, to be her partner in joy and comfort in sorrow, to build with her a life worthy of the love we share. And do you, Naomi, take Beckett to be your husband? Do you promise to love him, honor him, cherish him, and stand by his side through all the seasons of life that lie ahead? I do, Naomi replied, tears of pure happiness streaming down her face. I promise to love Beckett with my whole heart, to be his partner in building a family, to support his dreams and share his burdens, and to choose him every day for the rest of my life. But it was what happened next that made this ceremony unlike any other. Instead of immediately exchanging rings, Doctor, Kodere turned to Isley with a smile that included her fully in the proceedings. Isley, he said gently, do you promise to be a loving daughter to both Beckett and Naomi, to help them build a family based on kindness, honesty, and love? Isley stood straighter, her young voice carrying clearly as she spoke the words she had been practicing for weeks. I promise to be the best daughter I can be, and I promise to love them both, forever and ever. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as the 8-year-old girl took her place between her father and soon-to-be mother, symbolizing the family unit that was being officially created with these vows. The rings, please, Doctor, Kodere said, and Isley carefully lifted the bands from their pillow, presenting them with the pride of someone who understood her crucial role in this moment. Beckett took Naomi's ring first, a simple band of white gold that complemented her engagement ring perfectly. As he slipped it onto her finger, he spoke words that came from his heart rather than any traditional script. With this ring, I give you my promise that you will never again doubt your worth, never again wonder if you are loved, never again face life's challenges alone. You are my heart, my home, my greatest blessing. Naomi accepted her ring to him with hands that trembled slightly from emotion. The band was identical to hers, simple and elegant, and perfect for the man who had chosen love over convention, family over status, real happiness over empty respectability. With this ring, she said, her voice strong despite her tears, I give you my promise that you will always have a partner who believes in you, always have a home filled with love and laughter, always have someone who sees the goodness in your heart and loves you for exactly who you are. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Virginia, Dr. Kodere announced with satisfaction, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Beckett, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was soft, sweet, and perfect, the seal on promises made not just between two people, but between three hearts that had found their way to each other despite every obstacle the world had placed in their path. As they broke apart, both glowing with happiness, the small gathering erupted in applause and cheers that seemed to make the very flowers bloom brighter in response. Ladies and gentlemen, Doctor, Kodere announced with obvious joy, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Beckett Royce and their daughter Isley, a family united by love and commitment, blessed by joy, and ready to face the future together. What followed was the kind of celebration that money couldn't buy, but love created effortlessly. Champagne flowed, the wedding cake was cut with ceremony and shared with laughter, and toasts were offered that brought tears and smiles in equal measure. To Beckett and Naomi, Geneva Faye said, raising her glass with the authority of someone who had watched her sister's happiness unfold, who proved that the best love stories are the ones where people choose each other not once, but every day, through every challenge, with every breath. To love that builds families, added Clarice Wainwright, to courage that chooses happiness over convention, and to the knowledge that home is wherever hearts find their perfect match. But it was Isley's toast that brought the house down, delivered with 8-year-old sincerity that made every adult present remember why they believed in happy endings. To my daddy, who picked the best mama in the whole world, and to my mama, who makes our family complete, I love you both, infinity plus one. As the afternoon mellowed into evening and the celebration continued under the oak trees, none of the wedding party noticed the figure that stood at the edge of the property line, barely visible through the trees that bordered the estate. Cambria West had told herself she was only driving by, that she had no intention of stopping, that watching her former family celebrate without her would be nothing but masochistic torture. But she found herself unable to leave, drawn by some compulsion she couldn't name, to witness what she had thrown away. From her vantage point, she could see everything, the elegant simplicity of the ceremony, the genuine joy on every face, the way Beckett looked at his new wife like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever voiced. Most painfully, she could see Isley's radiant happiness, the way the child clung to both her father and stepmother, with the security of someone who knew, beyond any doubt, that she was loved. This was what she had possessed and discarded. This was what she had been too shallow to recognize, too selfish to value, too foolish to protect. Watching the woman she had dismissed as just the help become the heart of the family she had carelessly betrayed, Cambria finally understood the magnitude of her loss. She had lost more than a husband and comfortable lifestyle. She had lost the chance to be part of something real, something beautiful, something that would have grown stronger with each passing year instead of crumbling under the weight of her indifference. As the evening shadows grew longer and the wedding celebration showed no signs of ending, Cambria West turned away from the sight of the happiness she would never share and walked back to her car with tears streaming down her face. She had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. Behind her, in the garden of Royce Manor, the celebration continued with the kind of joy that would be remembered for generations. Not because it was expensive or elaborate, but because it marked the beginning of a love story that would prove stronger than any obstacle, deeper than any tradition, and more lasting than any challenge the world could create. Mr. and Mrs. Beckett Royce danced their first dance as husband and wife beneath the stars, surrounded by family and friends, blessed by love, and finally, completely perfectly home. Chapter 8. Celebration. As twilight painted the Virginia sky in shades of rose and gold, the wedding reception transformed from ceremony into pure celebration, the kind of gathering that would be remembered long after the last guest had gone home. The reception dinner was served on tables scattered throughout the garden, each one decorated with simple arrangements of roses and baby's breath that perfumed the evening air with sweetness. Candles flickered in glass hurricanes, creating pools of warm light that made every face glow with happiness and every conversation feel intimate despite the outdoor setting. "This is perfect," Naomi said to her new husband as they moved from table to table, greeting their guests and accepting congratulations with grace that made everyone feel personally blessed by their presence. "Absolutely perfect." "You're perfect," Beckett replied, unable to stop touching her, a hand at the small of her back, fingers intertwined with hers, the gentle brush of his thumb across her wedding ring, as if he needed constant confirmation that she was really his wife. The menu was elegant in its simplicity: fresh Virginia ham, garden vegetables prepared with the cook's special touches, and bread that had been baking all afternoon to ensure it reached the table still warm from the oven. But it was the company that made the meal memorable. Intimate conversations flowing between people who genuinely cared about each other, laughter that rang across the garden like music, and the kind of warmth that money couldn't buy, but love created effortlessly. "I've never seen a more beautiful bride," declared Mrs. Caroline Coder, raising her wine glass in yet another toast to the happy couple. "You're absolutely glowing, my dear." That's what love does, Geneva Fay said with the satisfaction of someone who had watched her sister's transformation over the past months. It makes everything beautiful, especially the people experiencing it. Isley, still in her yellow flower girl dress but now with grass stains on the hem from dancing barefoot on the lawn, flitted between the tables like a butterfly, accepting compliments on her role in the ceremony and regaling anyone who would listen with detailed accounts of the wedding planning process. I helped pick all the flowers, she explained to Dr. Carteret with 8-year-old pride. And I practiced walking down the aisle for weeks and weeks until I got it exactly right. Daddy says I was the most important person in the whole wedding because I brought the rings. And you did a beautiful job, he assured her with the gentle attention that made him such a beloved family friend. Your parents are very lucky to have such a wonderful daughter. I'm lucky too, Easley replied with the wisdom that sometimes emerged from children when they were feeling particularly secure and loved. I got the best daddy in the world, and now I have the best mama too. That makes me the luckiest girl anywhere. As the evening progressed and the formal dinner gave way to dancing on the lawn, the celebration took on an almost magical quality. Someone had strung lights between the trees, creating a canopy of stars that competed with the real ones beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The music came from a small ensemble of local musicians who played with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they were genuinely happy to be part of such a joyful occasion. Beckett and Naomi's first dance as husband and wife was to The Way You Look Tonight, chosen because it had been playing on the radio the first evening they had acknowledged their feelings for each other. They moved together with the natural rhythm of people who had found their perfect partner, oblivious to their audience, lost in each other and the magnitude of what they had just promised. No regrets, Beckett asked softly as they swayed together in the center of their makeshift dance floor. Only that I can't marry you again tomorrow, Naomi replied with a smile that made his heart race. This has been the most perfect day of my life. The first of many, he promised, spinning her gently so that her ivory dress swirled around her like sea foam. We have the rest of our lives to create perfect days together. When the song ended, Dr. Carteret claimed the bride for the next dance, while Geneva Fay swept Beckett into a waltz, continuing the joyful rotation that ensured everyone got to share in the celebration. But it was Isley's dance with her new father that brought tears to every eye present. She stood on his shoes, her small hands gripping his fingers for balance, while he guided them around the impromptu dance floor with the careful attention of someone handling the most precious cargo in the world. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" he asked quietly, looking down at the little girl who had made their family complete. "The happiest ever," she replied without hesitation. "When I grow up, I want to have a wedding just like this one, with everyone I love most in one place, and no one being sad or angry or mean." "That sounds like a perfect plan," he agreed, lifting her slightly so she could see over the other dancing couples. "And when that day comes, Mama Naomi and I will help you make it just as beautiful as this one." As the evening wore on and the celebration showed no signs of ending, none of the wedding party noticed the lone figure that had returned to the edge of the property, drawn once again by a compulsion that was part fascination and part self-torture. Cambria West sat in her car with the engine off and the windows down, listening to the sounds of joy drifting across the summer air. From her position beyond the gate, she could see the golden glow of the reception, could hear the laughter and music that spoke of genuine happiness, could glimpse the dancing figures that moved with the easy intimacy of people who belonged together. This was her wedding anniversary, she realized with a start. July 15th. 9 years ago today, she had married Beckett Royce in an elaborate ceremony that had cost more than most people's annual income and been featured in society magazines across Virginia. 500 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, and a reception that had been talked about for months. And yet, watching this simple garden party with its 30 guests and modest decorations, her wedding had been a performance, a spectacle designed to impress rather than celebrate. This was what a real wedding looked like: intimate, genuine, filled with love instead of obligation. She had possessed all of this once: the devotion of a good man, the love of a beautiful child, the respect of people who mattered. She had thrown it all away for what? A moment of selfish pleasure with a man whose name she could barely remember, whose face had faded from memory as soon as he left town. The woman dancing in Beckett's arms, the woman Isley clung to with obvious adoration, the woman who had been invisible to her for 3 years. She was everything Cambria had never been and never could be. Kind where Cambria was selfish, genuine where Cambria was calculating, capable of the kind of selfless love that built families instead of destroying them. "I could have learned," she whispered to the empty car, her voice breaking on words that came too late to matter. "I could have tried to be better, to love them the way they deserved. Why didn't I try?" But she knew the answer. She had been too proud, too shallow, too convinced that she deserved love without having to earn it or return it in equal measure. She had taken Beckett's devotion for granted, dismissed Isley's need for genuine maternal attention, and never once considered that the quiet woman who kept their household running might possess depths of character that put her own to shame. Now it was too late. The man she had betrayed was dancing with his true love, the child she had neglected was calling another woman Mama, and the life she had casually discarded was being lived with joy and gratitude by people who understood its value. As the evening wound toward its natural conclusion, and guests began offering final congratulations before departing, Cambria started her car and drove away from Royce Manor for what she knew would be the last time. There was nothing left for her here, no second chances, no possibility of redemption, no hope that the family she had destroyed might somehow welcome her back. She had made her choices, and this was the consequence: to be forever on the outside looking in at the happiness she had been too foolish to protect when it was hers. Behind her, the celebration continued with the kind of joy that comes from hearts that have found their perfect match, from love that has overcome every obstacle, from a family that had chosen each other and would continue choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. Mr. and Mrs. Beckett Royce, along with their beloved daughter Isley, had found their way home to each other. And nothing, not regret, not longing, not the hollow ache of what might have been, could diminish the perfect completeness of what they had built together. The best was not yet to come. The best was happening right now, in this moment, in this garden, in this celebration of love that had proven stronger than every challenge the world could create. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. As the last guests departed and the wedding candles flickered down to gentle flames, the newly married Royce family found themselves alone in their garden sanctuary, surrounded by rose petals and the lingering magic of the most perfect day imaginable. "I don't want it to end," Eastleigh announced from her perch on the garden swing, still wearing her flower girl dress despite the late hour and grass stains that told the story of an evening spent dancing barefoot on the lawn. "I want every day to be like today, with everyone happy and dancing and celebrating our family." "Every day will be a celebration," Naomi promised, settling beside her new daughter on the swing while Beckett gathered the scattered rose petals from their aisle. "Maybe not with cake and dancing, but every day we're together as a family is worth celebrating. Even regular days, like when I have to do arithmetic homework and eat vegetables." "Especially those days," Beckett said, joining them on the swing and creating a perfect family tableau under the star-filled Virginia sky. "Because those are the days when we get to take care of each other, help each other, and remember how lucky we are to have found each other." The garden around them bore the gentle evidence of their celebration: chairs arranged in loving rows, the flower arch still beautiful despite wilted edges, and tables decorated with the remnants of a feast shared in joy. But it was the feeling in the air that made the evening special, the sense of completion that comes when hearts finally find their perfect home. I keep wanting to pinch myself, Naomi confessed, leaning against her husband's shoulder with contentment that felt almost too perfect to be real. This morning I was Naomi Breyer, and now I'm Mrs. Beckett Royce. This morning I was hoping to become Isley's mother, and now I officially am. Sometimes happiness feels too big to believe. Believe it, Beckett said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head that smelled like roses and wedding joy. We earned this happiness, all three of us. We chose love over fear, family over convention, real connection over empty respectability. This is what courage creates. As they sat together in their garden, none of them noticed the car that had returned once more to the edge of their property, or the woman inside who watched their intimate family moment with an expression of such profound loss that it would have moved even hearts hardened against her. Cambria West had driven home after the reception, sat in her small apartment for exactly 20 minutes, and then found herself compelled to return for one final glimpse of what she had thrown away. She told herself it was masochistic curiosity, but the truth was simpler and more painful. She couldn't bear to let go of the last connection to the life that should have been hers. From her position beyond the gate, she could see the three figures on the garden swing: her former husband, the child who had once called her mama, and the woman who had quietly stolen everything she had been too foolish to value. They sat together with the natural intimacy of people who belonged together, who had chosen each other and would continue choosing each other through every challenge life might bring. This was what she had possessed for 9 years without ever truly seeing it. This was what she had treated as background scenery while she focused on social obligations and empty pleasures. This was what she had betrayed with her casual infidelity and defended with cold indifference when confronted with the consequences. Watching Isley curl up between her father and stepmother with the security of a child who never doubted she was cherished, Cambria felt the full weight of her loss settle over her like a shroud. She had given birth to that little girl, but had never truly mothered her. She had shared a bed with that good man, but had never truly loved him. She had lived in that beautiful house, but had never made it a home. The woman she had dismissed as just the help had done all of those things with a grace and generosity that put Cambria's own efforts to shame. Naomi had seen treasures where Cambria had seen obligations, had found joy where Cambria had felt burdened, had created love where Cambria had merely existed. I could have had this, she whispered to her empty car, tears streaming down her face as she watched the family she had destroyed celebrate their happiness without her. I could have been part of this if I had just tried to love them the way they deserved. But it was too late for could-haves and should-haves, too late for regret or redemption or second chances. The life she was watching through tears belonged to someone else now, someone who had earned it through years of selfless devotion, someone who understood that love was a verb rather than a noun, someone who had proven herself worthy of the family Cambria had casually discarded. Inside the garden, the conversation had turned to plans for the future. Tomorrow's honeymoon trip to nearby Williamsburg, the adoption papers that would make Naomi legally Isley's mother, the small changes they wanted to make to the house to reflect their new status as a complete family. "Can we plant the white rose bush tomorrow?" Isley asked with the practical enthusiasm of a child planning important projects. "The one we picked out to remember the wedding? I want to help dig the hole and water it, and watch it grow." "We can do that first thing in the morning," Naomi agreed, already imagining the yearly ritual of tending their anniversary rose and watching it bloom as their marriage flourished. "And every year on July 15th, we'll sit beside it and remember this perfect day." And tell the story of how you and Daddy fell in love and got married and made us a real family, Isley added, with the dramatic flair of someone who understood that the best stories had happy endings. The best story ever told, Beckett confirmed, gathering both his wife and daughter closer in an embrace that felt like the physical manifestation of home itself. Eventually, as the evening grew late and even 8-year-old excitement began to give way to exhaustion, they made their way inside to the house that had witnessed their love story unfold from its tentative beginnings to this triumphant conclusion. "I'll tuck Isley in," Naomi offered, but Beckett shook his head with a smile. "We'll both tuck her in," he corrected gently. "That's what families do. They take care of each other together." The bedtime routine was sweet and simple, helping Isley out of her grass-stained dress, listening to her excited recap of every detail from the day, and reading one final story about princesses and happy endings and families who loved each other forever. "I love you, Daddy," Isley said as they kissed her goodnight, her voice sleepy but content. "And I love you, Mama Naomi. This was the best day of my whole entire life." "Mine too, sweetheart," Naomi replied, smoothing the covers around the child who had made their family complete. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful girl." As they turned off the lights and left Isley to sleep, surrounded by the security of unconditional love, Beckett and Naomi found themselves alone for the first time as husband and wife. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Royce?" he asked, taking her hands and marveling once again at the wedding ring that marked her as his forever. "Like coming home after a lifetime of wandering," she replied honestly, "like finding the other half of my soul that I didn't even know was missing." They talked quietly as they prepared for bed, sharing the intimate details that married couples exchanged, hopes for their future, gratitude for their present, and the deep contentment that comes from promises kept and dreams fulfilled. But as they finally settled into sleep in the master bedroom that was now truly theirs to share, neither of them saw the car that drove slowly past their gate one final time before disappearing into the Virginia night. Cambria West had seen enough. She had witnessed the complete and utter happiness of the family she had lost, had watched the woman she had underestimated become the heart of the home she had never appreciated, had finally understood the magnitude of what her selfishness had cost. Now there was nothing left but to drive back to her small apartment, to her lonely existence, to the future she had created through her own choices. She had thrown away a kingdom for a moment of meaningless pleasure, and now she would spend the rest of her life as an exile from the happiness she had been too foolish to protect. Behind her, in the house that glowed with warmth and love, Mr. and Mrs. Beckett Royce fell asleep in each other's arms, surrounded by the peace that comes from hearts that have found their perfect home. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new joys, new opportunities to build the beautiful life they had chosen together. But tonight, they simply held each other close and marveled at the miracle of love that had transformed 3 separate lives into one perfect family. The best was yet to come, but the foundation for forever had been laid with wedding vows, adoption papers, and the kind of commitment that would prove stronger than any challenge the future might bring. They were home. They were family. They were exactly where they belonged. Chapter 10: The Irreplaceable Woman. Few months later, January 1960. Snow fell gently on Royce Manor like blessing from heaven, covering the Virginia countryside in pristine white that made everything look fresh and full of promise for the new decade ahead. Naomi Royce stood at the kitchen window, one hand resting on her growing belly as she watched her husband and daughter build a snowman in the garden where they had been married. At 4 months pregnant, she glowed with the kind of happiness that came from a life lived exactly as it was meant to be, surrounded by love, filled with purpose, blessed with a family that chose each other every single day. "Mama! Mama!" Isley burst through the kitchen door in a flurry of snow and excitement, her cheeks red from cold and her eyes bright with joy. "Come see our snowman. Daddy says it looks just like Uncle Dempsey, but I think it looks like Grandpa Burrell." Naomi laughed, the sound filling the warm kitchen with music that had become the soundtrack of their daily life. Beckett's father had surprised everyone by not only accepting the marriage, but embracing it wholeheartedly, declaring that any woman who could make his son and granddaughter so obviously happy was exactly the daughter-in-law he had always hoped for. "Let me get my coat," Naomi said, wrapping herself in the warm wool cloak that accommodated her changing figure. "I want to see this masterpiece." Outside in the garden, Beckett was putting finishing touches on what was indeed a remarkably detailed snowman, complete with a carrot nose and buttons made from pieces of coal. He looked up as his wife and daughter approached, his face lighting up with the kind of joy that never seemed to fade, no matter how many months passed since their wedding day. "What do you think, Mrs. Royce?" he asked, using the title that still made her heart skip beats, even after 6 months of marriage. "Worthy of the Royce family gallery." "Absolutely perfect," she replied, accepting the kiss that still felt like the first one, still carried the power to make her believe in fairy tales. "Just like everything else in our life." It was true. The past 6 months had been a string of perfect days, each one building on the last, to create a happiness so complete it sometimes took her breath away. The adoption papers making her officially Isley's legal mother. The pregnancy announcement that had sent their daughter into ecstasies of excitement about becoming a big sister. The quiet evenings when they sat together in the library, reading aloud while Isley drew pictures of their growing family. "Can we make snow angels?" Isley asked, already flopping backward into the pristine white carpet with the abandon of childhood. "Careful of Mama's baby," Beckett warned gently, but he was already lying down beside his daughter, moving his arms and legs to create perfect angel wings in the snow. Naomi laughed and carefully lowered herself to join them, creating a third angel between theirs, a family of snow angels that would remain in their garden until the spring thaw, a temporary monument to permanent joy. As they lay there looking up at the gray winter sky, none of them noticed the lone figure standing at the edge of the property, partially hidden by the bare branches of the trees that lined the estate. Cambria West had not intended to return to Royce Manor. For 6 months she had fought the compulsion to drive by the home that had once been hers, had struggled to accept that her former life was continuing without her in ways that surpassed even her most painful imaginings. But today, seeing the announcement of Naomi's pregnancy in the Richmond Society pages, a small item noting that Mr. and Mrs. Beckett Royce were expecting their first child together, she had found herself unable to stay away from one final glimpse of the happiness she had thrown away. What she saw in the snow-covered garden broke her heart and healed it simultaneously. There was the man she had betrayed, more handsome and joyful than she had ever seen him during their 9 years of marriage. There was the child she had neglected, radiant with the security that came from being truly, deeply loved by parents who cherished her. And there was the woman she had dismissed as insignificant, now glowing with pregnancy and the kind of contentment that came from a life lived with purpose and meaning. They were making snow angels together, the three of them, laughing with the pure joy that comes from simple pleasures shared with people you love. It was a scene so perfect, so genuinely happy, that even Cambria's bitter heart couldn't help but recognize its beauty. This was what she had possessed and discarded. This was what she had been offered and rejected. This was the kingdom she had ruled over without ever understanding its value, the treasure she had traded for fool's gold and momentary pleasure. "I could have had this," she whispered to the cold air, her breath forming clouds that dissipated like dreams. "I could have been the one carrying his child, watching our daughter play, building a life worth living. Why didn't I see it when I had the chance?" But she knew the answer. She had been too shallow to recognize love when it was freely given, too selfish to return it in kind, too proud to admit when she was wrong, and too foolish to understand what she was losing until it was gone forever. The woman now lying in the snow with Beckett and Isley, the woman she had treated as invisible for 3 years, had seen treasures where Cambria had seen burdens, had found joy where Cambria had felt trapped, had built love where Cambria had merely existed. Naomi Royce was everything Cambria had never been and never could be: genuinely kind, naturally maternal, capable of the selfless love that created families instead of destroying them. She had earned the happiness she now possessed through years of patient devotion, through countless small acts of service and love, through the kind of character that couldn't be faked or bought or learned from books. As Cambria watched, Beckett helped his pregnant wife to her feet with the tender care of a man who understood he was holding his entire world in his arms. Isley brushed snow from her mother's coat with the automatic attention of a child who had been taught to think of others before herself. And Naomi smiled at both of them with the radiant joy of a woman who had found her perfect place in the universe. They began walking toward the house, arms linked, talking animatedly about hot chocolate and warm fires, and the afternoon they would spend together as a family. Their footsteps in the snow created a path that spoke of unity, of belonging, of 3 lives that had become inextricably woven together by choice and commitment, and the kind of love that lasted forever. "She's irreplaceable," Cambria said aloud, the words torn from her heart like a confession. "She always was, and I was too blind to see it. She's the heart of that family, the soul of that home, the woman who made all of them complete." It was the first time in her life that Cambria West had spoken an absolute truth about love, and the recognition of it brought tears that froze on her cheeks before they could fall. She had lost everything to a woman who had been invisible to her, invisible to society, invisible to everyone except the people who mattered most. The quiet maid had won the love of a good man, the devotion of a beautiful child, and the kind of happiness that money couldn't buy but character could earn. And she deserved every bit of it. As the family disappeared into the warm golden glow of the house that was truly their home, Cambria turned away from the sight of the life she would never share and walked back to her car for the last time. She would not return again. There was nothing left for her here, no role for her to play in this story, no hope that the family she had destroyed through her own choices would ever welcome her back. She had made her bed with betrayal and selfishness. Now she would lie in it alone, while the woman she had underestimated lived the life of joy and purpose that should have been hers. Inside Royce Manor, the family settled into their afternoon routine with the comfortable intimacy of people who had found their perfect rhythm together. Hot chocolate was prepared and shared, a fire was lit in the library fireplace, and Isley settled between her parents to hear the story she requested every day. The tale of how Daddy and Mama had fallen in love and gotten married and created the most wonderful family in the whole world. "Tell the part about the wedding again," Isley requested, curling against Naomi's side with the security of a child who had never doubted she was cherished. "Tell about how beautiful Mama looked and how happy Daddy was and how I was the best flower girl ever." "You were indeed the best flower girl ever," Beckett confirmed, settling on Naomi's other side and placing his hand over the slight swell where their new baby grew. "And Mama was so beautiful that I almost forgot my own name when I saw her walking down the aisle." "And we all lived happily ever after," Isley concluded with satisfaction, "just like in the fairy tales, except this one is real." "The realest story ever told," Naomi agreed, pressing kisses to the top of her daughter's head and accepting another from her husband with the contentment of a woman who had found her perfect place in the universe. Outside, snow continued to fall on the garden where they had pledged their love, covering their snow angels and the rose bush they had planted on their wedding day. Spring would come again, bringing new blooms and new growth and new opportunities for joy. But even winter couldn't diminish the warmth that filled Royce Manor, couldn't touch the happiness that radiated from every room, couldn't dim the love that had transformed three separate lives into one perfect family. Naomi Royce, the woman who had once been invisible, who had been dismissed as just the help, who had quietly and patiently earned the devotion of the people who mattered most, had won everything worth winning. The love of a good man, the trust of a precious child, and the deep satisfaction that came from a life lived with purpose and meaning. She was, indeed, irreplaceable. And finally, beautifully, permanently, she was home. The end. Love had conquered everything, just as it always does when hearts are brave enough to choose what matters most. If you've enjoyed this story, the subscribe button has appeared on your screen. Don't forget to hit it, because in this vast world, where will we ever find you again?